The planet Terria looked like something pulled from a dream. Its endless forests glowed with soft blue light after sunset. Silver rivers wound across the landscape, producing haunting melodies whenever the wind brushed their surface. Above it all stretched a violet sky, illuminated by twin suns that painted the horizon in liquid gold. To outsiders, it was beautiful. To the Terrian people, it was sacred. For thousands of years, the Terrians had ruled their world without challenge. They were towering feline warriors, covered in thick fur, stronger and faster than most known species. Their clans respected only strength, courage, and honor. No foreign civilization had ever been allowed to walk freely upon their soil. Until today. The arrival began with a streak of fire across the sky. Children pointed upward. Hunters stopped their patrols. Warriors reached for their weapons. A silver spacecraft emerged from the clouds and descended toward the Great Plains, its engines shaking the ground like distant thunder. The humans had arrived. Hundreds of Terrians gathered to witness the landing. The ship settled onto the grass with a hiss of steam and glowing exhaust. Then the hatch opened. Several humans stepped onto the surface wearing white exploration suits. A ripple of amusement spread through the crowd. They looked small, thin, fragile, nothing like warriors. Many Terrians exchanged smug smiles. These creatures didn't appear capable of surviving a single night in Terria's wilderness, let alone threatening its people. Among the newcomers was a man named Elias Carter. Unlike the military officers beside him, Elias carried no weapon. He wasn't a commander. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't even a soldier. He was an engineer. A man whose job was simply to build, repair, and solve problems. His brown eyes held a quiet curiosity as he studied the strange world around him. There was no fear in his expression, only fascination. As he stepped forward, something unexpected happened. The atmosphere changed. His calm confidence contrasted sharply with the nervous energy of the other visitors. He smiled politely at the assembled warriors, and somehow that simple gesture caused several Terrians to loosen their grip on their weapons. At the front of the crowd stood Captain Sarai, the most respected warrior of the Iron Fang clan. Her silver fur shimmered beneath the twin suns, and her golden eyes burned with the intensity of molten metal. Scars crossed her arms and shoulders, trophies earned from battles against predators that most species wouldn't dare face. She had survived volcanic storms. She had hunted creatures larger than armored transports. She had led her clan through wars that became legends. Strength was the language she understood. And as she looked at the human engineer standing before her, she felt only one thing: disappointment. This was humanity? This ordinary, smiling male? The tiny creature didn't look like someone who belonged on a dangerous frontier world. He looked like someone who would get lost on the way to breakfast. Yet as Sarai watched him, a strange feeling crept into her thoughts. The human wasn't acting like someone standing before an army of warriors. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't nervous. And somehow, that made him far more interesting than she wanted to admit. They all looked alert, eyes moving constantly. Even here in a peaceful meeting, they watched for danger. "Ambassador Cathara," Marcus said. His voice was deep and calm. "Thank you for welcoming us to your home." He bowed in the human way, not too deep, but respectful. Then he did something unexpected. He tried to bow in the Valari style, arms swept wide and head tilted. It was clumsy, but it showed he had tried to learn their customs. "Envoy Chen," she replied, her words creating small musical notes in the air. "Welcome to Deep Station. We are honored by your presence." The formal words meant nothing. They both knew why he was here. The Devourers were coming. Two species that had barely known each other now needed to become allies. Marriage was how the Valari sealed important agreements. The first dinner was awkward. Humans and Valari ate different foods and sat differently. Marcus struggled with their floating chairs, while Cathara watched him try human utensils for the first time. "Tell me about your world," she said, trying to make conversation. Marcus set down his fork. "Earth is complicated. We have many different peoples, many different ways of living. Sometimes we fight each other, but when something threatens all of us, we come together. Like now? Like now?" He studied her face. "What about your people?" I've read the reports, but I want to know what you think. She was surprised. Most aliens ask about their technology or their government. We value harmony, everything in its proper place. We don't like chaos. The Devourers bring chaos. Yes. She touched the crystal pendant at her throat. They consume everything. Worlds, peoples, even stars. They turn everything into more of themselves. Marcus nodded. We know about consumption. Humans have done it too. We learned to stop before we destroyed ourselves. Maybe we can teach that lesson to the Devourers. You think they can be reasoned with? His smile was not pleasant. I think they can be stopped. Over the next few weeks, they spent time together as custom required. Marcus was different from what she expected. He asked about her childhood, her dreams, what made her laugh. He told stories about Earth, how his people had once fought terrible wars, but learned to work together when faced with extinction. Humans are good at surviving, he said one evening, as they walked through the station's garden. The artificial stars above them twinkled like the real ones outside. So are the Valari. Yes, but differently. You survive by being perfect, by avoiding mistakes. Humans survive by adapting, by learning from disasters. Which way is better? Marcus stopped walking. Maybe that's why we need each other. Your people can help us make fewer mistakes. We can help you survive the mistakes that happen anyway. The marriage ceremony was held in the Great Hall. Valari singers filled the air with crystal music, while human musicians played their strange stringed instruments. The two melodies should have clashed, but somehow they worked together. Keith wore traditional white robes that chimed softly as she moved. Marcus wore his military dress uniform, dark blue with silver decorations. She noticed he still moved like a soldier, even on his wedding day. When they exchanged vows, she spoke the ancient words of her people. He replied in careful, then said something in human language. His translator whispered to her, in good times and bad times, in peace and war, until the last star dies. They exchanged rings and resonant stones. When she touched his hand to place the crystal that would let her sense his emotions, she felt something unexpected, not just duty or political calculation. There was curiosity there, and something that might become affection. The celebration lasted 3 days. Humans drank alcohol while Valari shared light song. Children from both species played together, not caring about the differences that worried their parents. On the last night, as the guests finally went to sleep, Cather and Marcus sat alone on their private balcony. What happens now? She asked. Now we learn to be married, and we prepare for war. You sound certain the Devourers will come. Marcus looked out at the stars. They always come. The only question is when, and what will we do? What humans always do. We'll adapt, we'll survive, and we'll make sure our enemies don't. There was something in his voice that made her shiver. Not fear, but recognition. This gentle man, who had learned her language and tried to understand her customs, there was steel underneath. When the time came, he would be ready for whatever the war demanded. A week later, the message came. The Outer Rim colonies had gone silent. Long-range sensors detected massive ships moving through the void, consuming everything in their path. The Devourers were coming. Marcus stood in their quarters reading the reports. His face was calm, but Cather could feel his emotions through the resonance stone. Determination, calculation, and underneath it all, something cold and sharp. It begins, he said quietly. She moved to stand beside him. What do? We fight, but not the way your people have fought before. The Devourers don't understand mercy or surrender. They only understand strength. And if we're not strong enough, Marcus looked at her, and for a moment, she saw past the diplomat to the soldier beneath. Then, we become strong enough. Whatever it takes. Outside their window, ships began to gather. Human vessels and Valari cruisers taking formation together. Two species learning to fight as one, against an enemy that wanted to devour them both. The war was beginning, and Cathara was starting to understand that her husband might be exactly what they needed. A human who could be gentle enough for peace and hard enough for war. 6 months had passed since their wedding. Keir stood in the war room, watching her husband point at the star map with a metal rod. Red dots marked the lost colonies. Yellow ones showed where the Devourers would likely strike next. They follow patterns, Marcus said to the circle of Valari commanders. Look here and here. They always attack the richest worlds first, then use those resources to build more ships. Commander Vilak's crystal face showed doubt. You suggest they think like us, but they are animals. They only know hunger. No, Marcus said firmly. They're smart animals. That makes them dangerous, but it also makes them predictable. Cather watched the other commanders. They respected Marcus now, but it had taken time. At first, they saw only a human diplomat playing at war. That changed after the Battle of Corinth Prime. Marcus had suggested a retreat. The Valari commanders wanted to make a glorious stand. Marcus explained something he called tactical withdrawal, pulling back to make the enemy think they were winning, then striking when they got careless. It worked. The Devourers rushed forward to claim what they thought was an easy victory. Instead, they found mines, traps, and hidden weapons. Half their fleet died in the ambush. The commander started listening after that. "Show them the Commando plan," Cathar said. Marcus nodded and changed the display. "The Devourers are heading for our main industrial worlds. We can't stop them with direct fighting. They have too many ships, but we don't have to." "Explain," Belak commanded. "We evacuate the populations, but leave the factories. When the Devourers arrive, they'll try to use our own industry against us. That's when we activate the hidden charges." The room went quiet. "You want to destroy our own worlds?" Another commander asked. "Better we destroy them than let the enemy use them. Humans call it scorched earth. If your enemy wants something, you make sure they can't have it." Cathar felt the shock ripple through the room. Valari didn't think this way. They built things to last forever, to be perfect. The idea of deliberately destroying their own creations was almost unthinkable, but Marcus wasn't finished. "After we deny them the industrial worlds, we hit their supply lines. The Devourers need massive amounts of material to keep growing. Cut off their food, and they start to weaken." He manipulated the display again. "Then we strike here at their forward bases. Not to win, but to make them angry. Angry enemies make mistakes. This is not war," Velk said slowly. "This is something else. It's human war," Marcus replied. "We don't fight fair. We fight to win." That evening, Cathara found Marcus on their private balcony. He stood looking out at the fleet anchorage where human and Valari ships practiced formation flying. "The commanders are frightened," she said. "They should be, or as frightening. Not of the enemy, of you, of the things you suggest." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Your people fight like artists. Everything must be beautiful, balanced, perfect. Humans fight like desperate animals. We do whatever works. And is that what you are? A desperate animal?" He turned to look at her. In the 6 months of their marriage, she had learned to read his expressions. Right now, he looked tired. "When I need to be, and what do you need to be now? I need to be the person who can save both our peoples. Even if that means becoming someone you might not like." She moved closer, taking his scarred hand in hers. "I married a diplomat, but I think I'm falling in love with a warrior." Something flickered in his eyes. "The warrior is dangerous, Cathara. More dangerous than you know. Show me." Marcus led her to his private study. Inside were books and data files she had never seen before. The titles made her crystal skin flutter with unease. "The Art of War," "Total War Theory," "Victory at Any Cost," "Earth History," Marcus explained. "Every war we've ever fought, every mistake we've made, every lesson we've learned." He picked up a thick book. "This one is about a war that killed 60 million humans. We learned that sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become something worse. The Devourers are monsters. But what does that make us? Survivors." The next morning brought terrible news. The Devourers had broken through the Kafar defense line. 3 colonies were gone, consumed completely. Billions of lives lost. The council called an emergency meeting. Marcus stood before the assembled leaders of the Valari consortium, calm despite the crisis. "I volunteer to lead a joint task force to the front lines," he said. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Finally, the prime speaker responded. "You are a diplomat, not a fleet commander. I'm the person who understands how humans fight. And right now, we need to fight like humans. You have no military rank, no formal training in fleet operations." Marcus smiled and Cathara felt a chill. "I have something better. I have the will to do what must be done." The debate went on for hours. Some counselors supported Marcus. Others worried about putting their fleets under alien command. In the end, it was Keith who cast the deciding vote. "I support my husband," she said simply. 3 days later, she stood in the launch bay, watching Marcus's ship prepare for departure. The Terran Resolve was a modified human cruiser reinforced with Valari crystal armor. It looked like what it was, a weapon built for war. Marcus wore his military uniform again, the one from their wedding. But something was different now. He moved with a predator's grace, and his eyes held depth she was only beginning to understand. "How long will you be gone?" she asked. "As long as it takes. And if you don't come back." Marcus took her hands through the resonant stone. She felt his emotions. Love, yes, but also determination so strong it was almost frightening. "Then I'll take as many of them with me as possible." He kissed her goodbye, gentle despite everything. Then he walked toward his ship, and Kythera saw the transformation happen. With each step, the diplomat fell away. By the time he reached the boarding ramp, only the warrior remained. The fleet departed at dawn. Kythera watched from the observation deck as 200 ships entered hyperspace. Half were vessels, graceful and powerful. The other half were human ships, ugly but deadly. Marcus's ship was the last to go. Just before it jumped, she received a transmission. His face appeared on her personal screen, already focused on the war ahead. "Take care of yourself," he said. "I have work to do." The transmission ended. The ship vanished into hyperspace. Kythera stood alone at the window, feeling the weight of what was coming. She had married a diplomat who became a warrior. Now she was about to learn what humans could do when they stopped pretending to be civilized. In the distance, stars burned in their ancient patterns. Soon, some of them might burn for very different reasons. Her husband was going to war, and he was bringing humanity's darkest gifts with him. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself hoping it would be enough. The first reports came 3 days after the fleet departed. Cather read them in her private chambers, crystal hands trembling slightly as she scrolled through the data. Contact established with Devourer Advance Force at Keftar Nebula. Enemy strength greater than expected. Admiral Chen requests permission to engage. She touched her resonance stone, but the distance was too great. She couldn't feel Marcus's emotions anymore, and couldn't sense if he was afraid or confident, or something else entirely. The next message arrived 6 hours later. Engagement begun. Enemy forces surrounding Task Force, implementing Protocol Sigma. Kythera didn't know what Protocol Sigma meant. It wasn't in any of the tactical manuals she had access to. She suspected it was something from those dark books in Marcus's study, something humans had learned in their bloodiest wars. She tried to contact the fleet directly, but communications were jammed. The Devourers always did that during battle, filling space with static to confuse their prey. The waiting was agony. Then, 24 hours later, the real-time feeds came through. Someone had managed to get a drone close enough to record what was happening in the Kevar system. Keith watched on the main screen in the command center, surrounded by Valari officers who stared in shocked silence. The Devourer fleet was massive. Hundreds of dark ships shaped like parasites, all teeth and consuming maws. They had surrounded Marcus's smaller force near the nebula's edge, closing in for what should have been an easy kill. But something was wrong. The human ships weren't running or fighting conventionally. They were moving deeper into the nebula, towards something that made Kythar's breath catch. "He's heading for the star," whispered Commander Velik. At the nebula's heart was a dying red giant, swollen and unstable. Any sane commander would avoid it. The radiation alone could kill a ship's crew in minutes. Marcus was flying straight toward it. "This is madness," another officer said. "No one can survive that close to stellar fire." Kythera watched her husband's ship, the Terran Resolve, leading the charge. Behind it came the rest of the human vessels, followed reluctantly by the Valari ships. They moved in perfect formation despite the chaos around them. The Devourers followed, convinced they were watching a suicide run. Their dark ships pressed closer, wanting to finish their prey before the star did it for them. That was when Marcus sprang his trap. The human ships didn't just approach the dying star. They dove into its outer layers. Keith watched in horror as the Terran Resolve disappeared into a corona of burning plasma that should have vaporized it instantly. "He's dead," Valak said flatly. "They're all dead." But then the sensors detected something impossible. Energy readings from inside the stellar fire growing stronger instead of weaker. The humans weren't just surviving in there. They were working. "What are they doing?" someone asked. Kythera thought of Marcus's books, his talk of desperate measures and acceptable losses. Something the Devourers won't expect. The answer came 30 minutes later. Deep inside the star, something exploded. Not the kind of explosion that destroys things, but the kind that changes them. The dying red giant, already unstable, suddenly began to collapse. But instead of falling inward naturally, it was being directed, controlled. "Stellar engineering," breathed one of the science officers. "They're forcing a premature supernova." The star began to die in fast motion. Its outer layers collapsed inward, building pressure and heat beyond imagination. But instead of exploding randomly in all directions, the human ships were somehow focusing the energy. Keith watched her husband emerge from the heart of a controlled stellar explosion. The Terran Resolve burst from the star surface like a bullet fired from a gun of pure fire. Its hull glowed white-hot, shedding pieces of armor that had been turned to plasma. Behind it came the other human ships, looking like fallen stars themselves. As they rode the wave of directed stellar energy, the beam that followed them cut through space like a sword of light. The Devour fleet had only seconds to realize what was happening. The focused energy of a dying star hit them like the wrath of gods. Their dark ships, built to consume and corrupt, simply vanished. Matter converted to energy, energy scattered to nothing. In less than a minute, a fleet of hundreds became scattered debris. But the human ships were still moving, still burning. Marcus's voice came through the static calm. Despite everything he had just survived, Devourer Advanced Force eliminated. Beginning pursuit of survivors. All Valari vessels maintain safe distance. We're still running hot. Cathara stared at the display. Her husband's ship looked like a flying furnace, too hot for normal sensors to track properly. The whole temperature readings were beyond what should be survivable. "How are they alive in there?" Falak asked. "They're humans," Cathara said quietly. "They adapt." The next few hours were a nightmare of waiting. The human ships chased down fleeing Devourer vessels, moving through space like comets trailing fire. Each time they fired their weapons, the energy discharges lit up the darkness. Finally, the pursuit ended. The last Devourer ship was destroyed. Marcus's voice came through the communications array again, but this time it sounded different. Tired, strained. "Task force to base. Mission accomplished. Requesting immediate medical support upon return." The fleet limped home over the next 2 days. When they finally arrived at Deep Station, Cathara was waiting in the medical bay. She watched through the observation window as Marcus's ship docked. The Terran Resolve looked like it had been forged in the heart of a star. Because it had been, the hull was warped from impossible heat. Sections had melted and reformed. Steam rose from cooling metal as the ship finally settled into its berth. When the airlock opened, medical teams rushed inside. They carried out the crew on stretchers, humans who had survived something no one should have been able to survive. Marcus came out last, walking on his own, but barely. His face was pale, his hands shaking. When he saw Cather, he tried to smile. "Did we win?" he asked. "You won," she said, taking his arm to support him. "But at what cost?" He looked back at his ship, at the crew being taken to medical treatment, the cost of doing what had to be done. In the medical bay, doctors worked to treat radiation poisoning unlike anything they had seen before. Marcus's crew had been exposed to stellar fire and lived. The medical readings were beyond belief. "How did you survive in there?" Keith asked as doctors examined her husband. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Human ships have better radiation shielding than you'd think, and humans ain't." He paused. "Humans are stubborn, sometimes too stubborn to die when we should. And the star. How did you control a supernova?" "We didn't control it. We just encouraged it, gave it a direction to fall. The star did the rest. But the risk was acceptable." His voice was firm despite his exhaustion. "The Devourers had to be stopped. If that meant riding a pouch or exploding star like a bullet, then that's what we did." Cathara studied her husband's face. This was the man she had married, but also someone else. Someone who could look at a dying star and see a weapon. Someone who could lead his people into the heart of stellar fire because it was the only way to win. The reports from the battle spread quickly through the consortium. The Valari had seen their human allies do something impossible. They had watched Marcus turn himself and his crew into living ammunition, fired from the barrel of an exploding star. It changed everything. The war was no longer about survival. It was about victory. And for the first time since the Devourers appeared, victory seemed possible. But Cather looked at her husband sleeping in the medical bed, his body fighting off radiation that should have killed him, and wondered what other impossibilities he was capable of. Outside the medical bay windows, space looked different. Somehow the stars seemed less permanent, as if they too could be turned into weapons if necessary. Her husband had shown her that humans didn't just adapt to war, they adapted war to themselves, reshaping the very nature of conflict to match their desperate creativity. The Devourers thought they were fighting another species. They were wrong. They were fighting humanity, and humanity fought back with the fury of stars. Marcus recovered slowly, too slowly. Cather sat beside his medical bed, watching him sleep. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Keftar Nebula, and the doctors were running out of optimistic words. The radiation exposure had been beyond anything they knew how to treat. His hands shook when he was awake. Sometimes he would stare at nothing for long minutes, lost in memories of stellar fire. The scars on his arms looked like lightning frozen in flesh, patterns burned in by energy that should have killed him. The reports came in, she said when he opened his eyes. The Devour main fleet has pulled back 2 sectors. They're regrouping. Marcus tried to sit up, winced, and settled back against the pillows. How long? The analyst thinks 6 months, maybe 8. Not enough time. Time for what? He looked at her with eyes that held too much knowledge. To heal, to rebuild, to get ready for what comes next. The door chimed. Commander Valax entered, his crystal form reflecting the medical bay's soft light. Behind him came Admiral Torres, the highest-ranking human officer in the Joint Fleet. Admiral Chen, Valax said formally. Marcus had been promoted after Kevlar, though he didn't seem to care about the new rank. The Council has approved your request. Which request? Keith asked. Marcus didn't look surprised. The Prometheus Protocol. What's the Prometheus Protocol? She demanded. Admiral Torres answered. Something we hoped we'd never have to use. A final strategy for when conventional warfare isn't enough. Marcus struggled to sit up again. This time he managed it, though it left him breathing hard. The Devourers are adapting. They've seen what we can do with stellar engineering. Next time they'll be ready. So, what do we do? Feltak asked. We escalate. Marcus's voice was quiet but certain. We stop trying to fight them with ships, and start fighting them with physics. Kea felt something cold settle in her stomach. What does that mean? It means we turn entire star systems into weapons. Not just one star, but chains of them. Cascading failures that spread across space like wildfire. The room went silent. Finally, Admiral Torres spoke. The risk is acceptable, Marcus finished. The alternative is extinction. After the others left, Cathara sat alone with her husband. Outside the window, she could see human and Dari ships training together. The crews had learned to work as one people, united by the threat they faced. You're planning to die, she said. Marcus didn't deny it. I'm planning to win. Those aren't the same thing for humans. Sometimes they are. She stood and began pacing. I've been studying your history, reading those books in your study. Do you know what I learned? Tell me. Humans don't just fight wars. You become wars. You turn yourselves into the conflict itself. She stopped and faced him. At Kevlar, you didn't use the star as a weapon. You became a weapon powered by a star. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Maybe. And now you want to do it again, but bigger. The Prometheus Protocol isn't just about chain reactions in space. It's about chain reactions in command. One human crew triggers the cascade. The others follow. We become a single weapon system with hundreds of parts. A weapon system that burns itself up if necessary. Cathara felt tears forming in her crystal eyes. And what about us? What about our marriage? Our future? Marcus reached for her hand. Through the resonant stone she felt his emotions, love and regret, and terrible determination all mixed together. I can't save our future if I don't stop the Devourers first. The next few months passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus recovered enough to leave the medical bay, though he never fully healed. His hands still shook, and some days the exhaustion would hit him like a physical blow. But he worked anyway, 16 hours a day, planning the impossible. The Prometheus Protocol required perfect coordination across dozens of star systems. Human crews would position themselves at carefully calculated points, then trigger stellar cascades in precise sequence, like dominoes made of suns. The timing has to be exact, Marcus explained to the assembled fleet commanders. 1 second too early or too late, and the cascade either fails or burns out of control. And if it burns out of control, a Valari admiral asked, then we lose half the galaxy instead of just the Devourer territories. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Commander Valak spoke. And you believe this is our only option? I believe the Devourers won't expect it. They think in terms of consuming resources, not destroying them. They can't understand a species that would burn entire star systems just to deny them to an enemy. Keith watched her husband speak and saw the change that had come over him. The gentle diplomat was still there, buried deep. But the surface belonged to someone else now, someone who could calculate the destruction of star systems with the same calm he once used for trade negotiations. The night before the final mission, they stood together on their private balcony. The fleet was assembled beyond the station, hundreds of ships ready to spread across the galaxy like seeds of fire. "I wish I could come with you," Cather said. "I need you here. Someone has to witness what we do. Someone has to remember why we did it. And if the cascade fails, if the Devourers survive." Marcus looked up at the stars. "Then at least we'll have shown them that some species would rather burn the galaxy than surrender it." He turned to face her. "Your people value harmony, balance, preservation. Mine value persistence. We keep going, even when going means dying. Maybe that's what the universe needs right now." "Promise me something," she said. "What?" "Promise me you'll try to survive. That you won't just throw your life away for a glorious ending." Marcus smiled, and for a moment, she saw the man she had married. "I promise I'll do whatever gives us the best chance of winning, even if that means coming home." The next morning, the fleet departed in waves. Each group headed for a different star system, carrying the tools and knowledge needed to turn suns into dominoes. Marcus's ship was the last to leave. The Terran Resolve had been rebuilt, its hull reinforced with new crystal armor. But Cathara could see the scars from Kevar, the places where stellar fire had left permanent marks. Before he left, Marcus gave her a sealed message packet. "If something goes wrong," he said, "if the protocol fails, open this. What's in it? Plan B." He wouldn't say more. He kissed her goodbye, and she felt his emotions through the resonant stone. Love and fear and determination, so fierce it was almost painful. Then he was gone, taking humanity's darkest gift to the stars. Cathar returned to the observation deck to watch the last ships disappear into hyperspace. Around her, the station felt empty despite the thousands of people still aboard. The warriors had gone to their war, leaving only the watchers behind. She clutched the message packet to her chest and tried not to think about what Plan B might involve. Knowing her husband, it would be something even more dangerous than turning star systems into weapons. In the distance, stars burned in their ancient patterns. Soon, some of those lights might go out forever, snuffed out by human hands to deny them to humanity's enemies. Or maybe they would burn brighter, consuming everything around them in cascades of directed fire. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. Marcus was making sure of that. The waiting was the hardest part. Cathar stood in the command center, surrounded by displays showing the positions of human and Dari fleets across the galaxy. Red dots marked Devourer territories. Blue dots showed where Marcus's ship should be. The cascade would begin in 6 hours. "Any word from the forward teams?" she asked. "All units report ready," came the reply. "Admiral Chen's group reached the primary target zone 3 hours ago. The primary target was the Devourer home system, a twisted knot of consumed worlds orbiting a massive black hole. The creatures had built their ultimate nest there. Thinking the gravity well made it impossible to attack, they were about to learn that humans saw impossible as a challenge, not a barrier. "Transmission coming in," announced the communications officer. "Admiral Chen requesting priority channel." The main screen flickered, then showed Marcus's face. He looked tired, but determined. Behind him, the bridge of the Terran Resolve was busy with final preparations. "Cathara," he said, his voice carrying across the light years between them. "The Prometheus protocol begins in 5 hours and 43 minutes. Everything is in position. How do you feel?" she asked, knowing it was a foolish question, but needing to hear his voice. Like someone about to light a very large fire. He almost smiled. "The Devourers don't know we're here yet. They're too focused on the gravity well to notice ships hiding in the outer stellar debris, and the cascade timing perfect. My team will trigger the first star. The energy wave will reach the second target in 18 minutes where Team Alpha is waiting. Then Team Beta at 36 minutes and so on." Cathara had memorized the sequence. 15 star systems their explosions time, to create a wave of destruction that would wash across Devourer space like a tsunami of fire. "What about you?" she asked. "What about your team?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "We'll ride the first wave as far as we can. After that," he shrugged. "Physics takes over, Marcus. I have to go. Final preparations." He leaned closer to the camera. I love you, Cathara. Remember that. No matter what comes next, the transmission ended. Cathar stared at the empty screen, touching her resonance stone. She could barely feel him across the vast distance. Just a whisper of emotion that might have been courage, or might have been fear. The hours crawled by throughout the command center. Velari officers monitored the galaxy-wide communications net, waiting for the signal that would change everything. At exactly 400 Standard Time, the cascade began. The first indication was a massive gravitational disturbance in the Caithmore system, where Marcus's team had been positioning themselves. Long-range sensors detected something impossible, a star beginning to collapse far ahead of its natural schedule. Stellar engineering detected in Sector 7, reported the science officer. Massive energy release beginning. On the display, the Caithmore star began to die in fast motion. But instead of exploding randomly, the energy was being focused, directed toward a specific point in space. The beam that emerged was like nothing anyone had ever seen. Pure stellar fire compressed into a lance of destruction that reached across the void toward the next target system. 18 minutes later, it arrived. The second star, already destabilized by human engineering teams, caught the energy wave and amplified it. 2 stars worth of destruction now raced toward the third target. Team Beta reports successful cascade initiation, came the update. Energy level increasing exponentially. On and on it went, each star adding its death to the wave. What had started as the destruction of one sun became something much larger, a rolling wall of annihilation that consumed everything in its path. The Devourers finally noticed when the wave reached their outer territories. Their dark ships tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run. The cascade was too large, moving too fast. Devourer home system in sight, the tactical officer announced. Wave arrival in 37 minutes. Cathar watched the display, hardly daring to breathe. The math was perfect. The timing was perfect. Everything Marcus had planned was working exactly as designed, but there was still no word from his team. Any contact with Admiral Chen's group? Negative. Last transmission was 6 hours ago. She tried the resonance stone again, but felt nothing. Either Marcus was too far away, or she pushed the thought away. He had promised to do whatever gave them the best chance of winning. That included surviving if possible. The cascade reached the Devourer home system at exactly 21:43 Standard Time. The creatures had built their nest around a black hole, thinking gravity would protect them. Instead, the focused energy of 15 dead stars poured into the gravity well, like water down a drain. What happened next violated every law of physics anyone understood. The black hole didn't just absorb the energy. It reflected it, amplified it, turned it into something new. The gravity well became a lens, focusing all that stellar fire into a beam that cut through the Devourer fleet like a blade through paper. In less than 3 minutes, 1,000,000 years of Devourer expansion was undone. Their ships, their structures, their captured worlds, everything simply ceased to exist. The command center erupted in cheers, but Cathara barely heard them. She was staring at the display, looking for any sign of the ships that had made this victory possible. Scanning for human vessels, the sensor operator announced, looking for life signs in the primary wave zone. The search took hours. Most of the human ships were simply gone, vaporized by the forces they had unleashed. But as the energy levels died down, a few signals began to emerge from the chaos. Contact. I'm detecting 3 ships in the outer debris field. Life signs checking. Yes, weak but present. One of them is broadcasting the Terran Resolve's identification code. Cathara felt her knees go weak with relief. Send a recovery fleet immediately. The rescue mission took 2 days. When the ships finally returned, Cathara was waiting in the medical bay. She watched as the first survivors were brought out on stretchers. Marcus came off the Terran Resolve under his own power, but barely. His ship looked like it had been chewed up by a star and spat out, which essentially it had. Did we win? He asked. The same question he'd ask after Kevar. You won, she replied, taking his arm. All of it. The Devourer Empire is gone. He nodded slowly, then looked back at what remained of his ship. Cost 87% casualties among the human fleet. Most of the Cascade ships didn't survive the energy release. Marcus closed his eyes. They knew it was a one-way trip. We all did. In the days that followed, the full scope of the victory became clear. The Prometheus Protocol had worked beyond anyone's wildest hopes. Not only had it destroyed the Devourer home fleet, but the Cascade had spread to their secondary bases. their supply lines, their breeding worlds. In one coordinated strike, humanity and its allies had eliminated a threat that had consumed dozens of species over millions of years. But the cost. Cathara sat in Marcus's study, reading the casualty reports. Thousands of human families had lost fathers, mothers, ships with names like Never Again and Last Stand had burned themselves out like candles in a hurricane. There, calling it the greatest victory in galactic history, she said when Marcus was strong enough to visit. Maybe it is. He was sitting in his chair, hands no longer shaking, but still scarred from stellar fire. But victory always costs more than you think it will. Was it worth it? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Ask me in a 100 years, when children who would have been devoured are growing up free. When species that would have been consumed are building new homes among the stars. He looked out the window at the memorial being constructed outside the station. Names of the lost were being carved into crystal that would shine forever. Humans don't fight for glory, he said finally. We fight so that tomorrow can be better than today. If the Prometheus Protocol gave the galaxy that chance, then yes, it was worth it. Later, as they stood together on their balcony, Keith asked the question that had been haunting her. What would you have done if the protocol failed? What was Plan B? Marcus smiled, and for the first time in months, she saw only the diplomat she had married. There was no Plan B. I just wanted you to think there was. Sometimes hope is more important than truth. She laughed despite everything. You're impossible. I'm human. It's the same thing. Years later, when the memorial was complete and new species were joining the galactic community, Keith would tell the story to anyone who would listen. She spoke of her husband not as the man who had burned stars like candles, but as the human who had proven that some people would sacrifice everything to protect what they loved. The devourers had thought they were conquering another species. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous. Humans who refused to surrender, who turned their own destruction into weapons, who burned across the battlefield like fallen stars and illuminated the darkness for everyone who came after. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not their technology or their tactics, but their absolute refusal to let the darkness win. And sometimes, when the night was clear and the stars shone bright, Cathara would look up and remember that some of those lights had burned for a purpose, lit by human hands to ensure that tomorrow would always have a chance to be better than today.